is justice. Here is punishment. Here in me.
Hey, what's up, world? I'm pretty excited about today's video because I believe it's a very meaningful video that can create some real change in the world. I'm also excited about this video because it's a video that I sort of wanted to redo for a very long time. You see, I have this video titled, "The 16th Amendment Income Tax is Unconstitutional." And I'm not very happy with the presentation of it. I mean, other people seem to really like it. It has hundreds of likes, it has thousands of views. But to me, it's a little bipolar. I start off kind of very serious, very calm, and then immediately start talking like a deranged sailor. And it's for several reasons. At that time of my life, I smoked a little bit too much weed, and it kind of made me like a horrible human being. I think marijuana has some downsides to it that a lot of people don't really ever talk about. Well, today I don't smoke any weed, and I think that my presentations are a little bit more professional, at least some of them. Some of them are a little immature, some of them too much off the cuff, a little too frank, but whatever. Let's not talk about that. Let's get right into this video. So there are some things that I really like about this video, and that is that the point that I make in this video, right at the beginning, is that income tax provides fuel for the machine. You see, we have a very tyrannical government, and its tyranny is largely only possible because of the amount of money that it takes in. If it didn't have all of this money, then it wouldn't be able to enact as much tyranny and imperialism as it does. So I believe that addressing the income tax and its unconstitutionality could go a long way to provide real change in this world, to sort of rein in this machine. Now, in this video in particular, I'm actually going to be replying to somebody who commented on this video who thinks that they know more about the Constitution than I do. Now, this person's an interesting person because somehow they have no content on their channel, but yet they have over 400 subs. This to me is kind of a red flag. To me, it says certain things about the person and maybe how connected they could be. So anyway, this person, Stefan Becker, and by the way, Stefan, I don't really like people named Stefan. There was a Stefan Molyneux, that wannabe philosopher from a couple of years ago. He used to be super popular, and then he just fell off the deep end, and he pretty much just proved himself a shill. And now it's funny too because he used to be all like, "Oh yeah, I'm against censorship in any form whatsoever." Now I can only find him on BitChute, and on BitChute, he has comments disabled. So today he loves that censorship. He's a real piece of work if you ask me. But anyway, we're not going to be talking about him in this video. I might be talking about him in a future video. But let's get right into this. So Stefan commented on, and by the way, I'm not just going to be replying to this person's comment. I will be expanding upon all of the things that I talk about in my 16th Amendment video, sort of making them a little bit more coherent and cohesive. So anyway, Stefan commented on this video and he said the following: "You seem to be starting from the misconception that there is a difference between the original body of the Constitution and amendments. That is not the case. Read Article 5 that discusses the amendment process. Once an amendment is ratified, it becomes fully part of the Constitution, meaning that the power to pass an income tax is in the Constitution due to the 16th Amendment, and there is no 10th Amendment issue. Had Congress tried to pass an income tax law without the 16th Amendment, that law would absolutely be unconstitutional." So anyway, Stefan, your comment makes zero sense. Because I prove the income tax unconstitutional not by looking at the main body of the original text or the original body of the Constitution. I do it by looking at the amendments. So this is a very confused comment to begin with. To me, it's him trying to sound intelligent. It's him trying to maybe even create a straw man, because he's talking about something that I don't even talk about in the video. I talk about the amendments, not the original body. Or maybe he's saying that I think that the amendments have more authority than the original body. That actually could be it. I'm sorry. I confused that. I just realized you're probably saying that the fifth or the Article 5 of the original body like supersedes the amendments that I talk about because it created an amendment, the 16th Amendment, which then makes everything A-OK. But of course, I prove in my replies to this guy that he doesn't know what he's talking about. So my reply to this person, instead of having like a long and lengthy reply, I respond with the following. So you think you can add an amendment that bans guns without first repealing the Second Amendment? Now, of course, I say this because, as we're going to see, the 16th Amendment in no way repeals or addresses the 10th Amendment, which is a really important amendment. But of course, there's other amendments that, of course, also prove that the 16th Amendment is unconstitutional. And of course, this guy, Stephen Becker, never addresses those other amendments. Not a single time. So he just fixates on the 10th Amendment, and of course he fixates on it erroneously, because he fails to actually see that the 16th Amendment is still in violation of the 10th Amendment, regardless if Congress passed the 16th Amendment using Article 5. And Article 5 is, of course, the part of the Constitution that explains how amendments are added to the Constitution. We'll be looking at it in a little bit. So anyway, Stephen replies with the following. There is no concept of repealing an amendment. A new amendment could clarify or completely undo the Second Amendment if it had enough support to be ratified. It's like he doesn't understand that undo is repealing. This guy's a real piece of work, as you're going to see. That would essentially serve as repealing it, but no, there is no concept of removing an amendment other than by adding a new one. Case in point would be the 18th Amendment and 21st Amendment. The 21st Amendment repealed the 18th Amendment, but not by deleting it, but by adding new texts that undid it. Now, this is interesting. His choice of language here is very interesting because he says things like deleting it, removing it, and undoing it, but all I said was repeal. All I said without repealing the Second Amendment first. So once again, here he's trying to create a straw man. He's trying to play with semantics, and that's essentially my reply. So let's look at my reply to his reply. It's going to be like an Inception video here. A reply to a reply to a reply to a reply. What are we? Are we in a reply or are we in a comment? Who can figure it out? I don't know. Who's in that movie? Is it Leonardo DiCaprio? I don't even know who's in that movie. I've actually never seen that movie all the way through. Because to me, it was just a garbage movie. To me, it was a movie that was put out there to convince people that they can't possibly know the truth. That, yeah, we could be in some incepted reality. It was a garbage movie, at least the parts of it that I saw and my understanding of it. Hollywood propaganda, psychological programming, psychological warfare. So anyway, my reply to him, sorry about the digression. Nice semantics. You know what I meant. And then after I said that, I then quoted a law firm, which says the following. The process of repealing or changing an amendment is outlined in Article 5 of the Constitution and basically requires at least 2/3 of both House of Congress to agree on the change, which must then be ratified, approved, by no less than 3/4 of all the states. Now to my next question. Does the 16th Amendment repeal the 10th Amendment explicitly in the same way that the 21st repeals the 18th? It's a rhetorical question because I already know that the answer is no. So, and we're going to be looking at the 18th, the 18th and the 21st Amendment to show exactly how one repeals the other. So he replies, "We are on the same page then. I thought in your question you were implying that a separate process would be required to repeal the Second Amendment." I don't know why he thought that. Like no way, like nowhere in my comment. Let's look at it. So you think you can add an amendment that bans guns without first repealing the Second Amendment? I guess I could see how he could have that understanding. I should have said, so you think you can add an amendment that bans guns that doesn't directly repeal the Second Amendment? But whatever. The thing is, though, if you look at the 21st Amendment, that's like one of the first things that it does. It has several clauses, and in the first clause, it basically is repealing the 18th Amendment. And of course, it has to do that. It has to, that is the logical order of events. You can't have the first clause be something like that doesn't repeal the 18th Amendment and then repeal the 18th Amendment at the end. That's not the order of thinking. That's not the order of logic. So anyway, let's get back to this. My point was that a properly written hypothetical amendment to ban guns would clearly also repeal or modify the second. It would all happen in one fell swoop. No need for a second process. I am not saying that the 10th Amendment was repealed at all. I am saying that the 10th Amendment grants all powers not listed in the Constitution to the states. Thanks to the 16th Amendment, income tax is now in the Constitution, and therefore the 10th Amendment is no longer invoked for that specific topic. This guy is a real piece of work. I love having conversations with people like this. It's like you're basically talking like past each other. And you're going to see that. It's just going to circle around. So my reply to him is, but the 16th Amendment can't do that without specifically addressing the 10th Amendment, which it doesn't. So you're wrong. Just admit it. And we're gonna see this when we look at these amendments. So let's look at his reply. His reply. Oh, by the way, we have two replies here, and my comment, because what ended up happening is after I said this, he apparently replied with this, but for some reason I couldn't see it. Several hours passed. I think that over 12 hours, maybe 18 hours passed. And then I was like, so you're not going to reply? You're not going to admit that you're wrong? And that's why we end up having this comment down here. But all we really need to look at is this comment up here. So he says, sure it can. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution are reserved to the states. And then he spells Constitution, now contains the amendment, Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes on incomes. So exactly. So, I mean, even here, he's acknowledging that the 10th Amendment is a cap on power. The power not delegated to the United States by the Constitution are reserved to the states. And then the 16th Amendment says, Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes on income. Any amendment modifies the 10th Amendment by virtue of changing what is in the Constitution. And basically, he just completely ignores what we had just addressed. He's making it like, oh yeah, you can just now, even though this amendment basically bans further powers to the federal government unless it's repealed or modified, this doesn't do it. And then he acknowledges that, yes, this is now giving Congress a power. It's giving the federal government a power. And then he's just like, yeah, man, any amendment modifies the 10th Amendment by virtue of changing what is in the Constitution. It's like, no, dude, it has to directly address the 10th Amendment in its wording, which the 16th Amendment does not. So then he goes on with this absolutely ridiculous story. I think I actually don't have the full thing here. So actually, I have it down here. So he says, and he creates this bouncer thing. Imagine I tell a bouncer at my party not to allow anyone in unless they have been invited. Then at the last minute, I give you an invitation. I don't need to go back to the bouncer. And then he basically has the saying over here. Where is it? Let's look at this analogy that he creates over here. This completely fallacious analogy. Okay, here we go. It would be as if I was hosting a private party and told the bouncer to only allow invited guests in. Then at the last minute, I give you an invitation. I don't have to go back to the bouncer and change the instructions to invited guests plus Mr. Uncensored. That's my channel's original name. By virtue of you being invited, you are now included in the instruction, even if you would not have been at the time I gave the instructions. Just like by virtue of something being added to the Constitution, it is no longer blocked by the 10th Amendment. It's like, so let me just address this analogy, because it just boggles my mind. Like, my mind is just blown away from this lack of logic. I don't even want to call it stupidity, just lack of logic and reasoning, this inability to follow a conversation, this inability to follow an argument. Okay, so his analogy is fallacious for a couple of reasons. See, a better analogy would be if he told the bouncer, do not allow any newly invited people into the party, even if they come with an invitation. Like, let's say his invitation had timestamps on it, And he was like, don't let anybody in who was invited after this point in time. If he told the bouncer that, then he would, and he gave me an invitation after, then he would have to go to the bouncer and then explain to him, oh, actually, you know what? Let's modify what I said before about not letting any new individuals in after this point in time. Okay, that's a much better analogy, Mr. Stefan, if you're watching this video. So this is my reply to this completely insane mental gymnastics that he tries to pull off here. This total straw man. Whoa, what insane mental gymnastics? Your analogy is fallacious and has zero to do with the Constitution. You're just repeating yourself now without acknowledging the facts we laid down. We have already addressed how an amendment that is in violation of a previous amendment must address, repeal, that amendment, like the 21st directly addresses the 18th. I'm curious, do you know where the first 10 amendments come from? Like, do you know what group of people we have to thank for those amendments? Are you aware of the arguments they put forward and how the first 10 amendments are supposed to appeal to those arguments in order to get that group to accept the Constitution and ratify it? If you are aware of this history, you will understand why the 10th Amendment is supposed to be a cap on the federal government's power. Okay, now let's look at the 21st Amendment. Section 1. The 18th article of amendment to the Constitution of the United States is hereby repealed. Oh man, what is that thing that I said before? What was it that he was all confused about? Can add an amendment that bans guns without first repealing the Second Amendment. See, this guy Stefan, in his world, you can just add an amendment. Oh, look, it was added. Oh, it doesn't matter what the Second Amendment says, because guess what? We added a new amendment. It doesn't need to address the Second Amendment. It can just say, oh, all guns are banned from here on forward. It's like, but you didn't address the Second Amendment, buddy. Okay, so this is how it's actually supposed to look. The 18th article of amendment to the Constitution of the United States is hereby repealed. The transportation of importation into any state, territory, or possession of the United States for delivery or use therein of intoxicating liquors in violation of the laws thereof is hereby prohibited. So this is actually even prohibiting the 18th Amendment. This article shall be inoperative unless it shall have been ratified as an amendment to the Constitution by convention in the several states as provided in the Constitution within 7 years from the date of the submission hereof to these states by the Congress. Of course, this comes from congress.gov. Okay, so you know this is coming from a valid source. So let's see this guy's reply. And you're going to see it's like he's stuck in a loop. I mean, he sounds like a person who's on acid that's just like stuck in a loop and can't get out of that loop. The 10th Amendment simply does not apply. What do you mean simply does not apply? Oh, why? Because you said so? You're just going to ignore what is said. And this is brilliant. I love people who argue like this. You lay down facts, you lay down empirical evidence, and they're just like, oh, it just simply does not apply. Oh, why? Because you said so? All right, buddy. It has nothing to do with the amendment process or taxation. It has everything to do with the amendment process. And we'll see that in a second. Once the Constitution has been modified, then the 10th Amendment is also satisfied. What? It's like he's just like making these assertions. It's like we've already laid down the facts, buddy. You're wrong. You can't admit that you're wrong because you got some kind of psychological or spiritual block going on in your head that prevents you from actually being able to see the reality at hand. The 10th in no way limits the power of future amendments. Wow. Only Article 5 does that. We're going to look at the 10th Amendment again, by the way, even though he already kind of gave a snippet of it. You can claim otherwise all you want, but that is both the plain reading of the text and settled case law. Oh yeah, look, there's a case. Somebody managed to convince a judge of this, or a judge managed to convince a bunch of ignorant people of this, so it's settled. It simply does not apply. The 18th set very specific restrictions that needed to be repealed. The 10th Amendment does too. The 10th Amendment does not specifically restrict taxes. My dude, we'll see that, okay? I'll be proving him wrong. I'm not gonna. If it did, then I would agree with you. I am aware of the history of the Bill of Rights and the desire to limit government. This guy does not, he's obviously not aware of the history of the Bill of Rights, even though I even talk about it in this video. I mean, I talk about it very poorly in this video, and that's why I'm going to have to elaborate upon it in this video, so maybe this is my fault. So anyway, specifically, if it did, then I would agree with you. I'm aware. Okay, yeah. The Founding Fathers also saw the value in allowing future generations to modify the Constitution as needed, which is what happened using the process they outlined. You know, I love this garbage here. The Founding Fathers. Okay, which Founding Fathers? Are you talking about the Federalists who tried passing a Constitution without a Bill of Rights? Are you talking about those guys? Are you talking about those snakes in the grass? Washington, Hamilton, and all these other shills that I've made videos proving that they're shills, that they're con artists? James the Con Man Madison? Are you talking about this guy who created a perverted version of the Bill of Rights that completely failed to address the actual amendments that the states were asking for? Are you talking about these founding fathers, quote unquote? This goes back to the description or the quote that I have in all of my videos that goes something along the lines of, everyone talks about these questions, but what is said lacks the minimum amount of clarity without which talking becomes a hazardous operation. Anybody talking about the Founding Fathers in this generalized sense has no idea what they're talking about. Anybody that's telling you that they saw the value in allowing future generations to modify have no idea what they're talking about. Yes, modifying the Constitution does not mean adding more powers to the Constitution. That is not what they wanted. At least that's not what the anti-federalists wanted. And those are the important Founding Fathers that we have to thank for our Bill of Rights. Because they're the ones who got us the Bill of Rights. These other Founding Fathers, these snakes in the grass, they dead ass tried passing a Constitution without a Bill of Rights. And that's why the Bill of Rights are considered amendments to the Constitution. Because the Constitution had to be amended thanks to the Anti-Federalists who refused to ratify the Constitution in their states unless there were amendments added to it. James the Con Man Madison, he claimed, oh yeah, I address your complaints, but he didn't. It was all propaganda. Very few people, and by very few people, I mean maybe only 3 people, actually understand the real history of the Constitution. Everybody else, their brains are dead.
Mr. Rico.
Yeah, I'll give you a comment. Their minds are dead.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, their minds are dead.
So I agree with your point that they would probably not be happy with the government we have today. I never even fucking said that. So once again, he's just like adding words to his stuff to sound smarter than he actually is. But that is not exactly the question. Yeah, nobody's talking about that. The question was if an amendment can be unconstitutional, and the answer is basically no. So this guy's straight up saying an amendment cannot be unconstitutional. This guy's out of his mind. The only limitation is that an amendment cannot change the number of senators per state. That is it. That is the only restriction. This guy has no idea what he's talking about. So anyway, I reply with, the 10th Amendment, this is me quoting him, quote, the 10th Amendment in no way limits the power of future amendment. This quote from you proves you don't have a clue about what you're talking about. The Anti-Federalists and those who demanded amendments were specifically worried that the federal constitution could be used to give the federal government an unlimited amount of powers via the amendment process. This was discussed in many historical papers at the time by people who were worried about the Constitution, and the people who were worried about the Constitution were the anti-federalists. They weren't actually anti-federalist. They weren't against federalization. They were just against that type of federalization. So what happened was the Federalists, these con men that I just talked about previously, Hamilton, Washington, James the Con Man Madison, they created this name for them, the Anti-Federalist, to confuse the minds of people. People were in agreement that we did need to federalize, that we did need some sort of federalized system. So they smeared them with this name Anti-Federalist to make it sound like, or make it appear like they were against any sort of federalization. And the Anti-Federalists even addressed this in some of their papers. They're like, look at this name that you created for us, this label that you've slapped on us to confuse the minds of the people, to confuse the minds of the masses. Anyway, about the Constitution, and who said it could create a government, I just messed this up, okay, create a government that is much more powerful and tyrannical than the King of England. That's probably how it should have read. So anyway, let's actually look at the facts here. Let's look at the 10th Amendment. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. Alrighty, before I move on, I'm adding this major edit to my video. And I realized this while I was editing the video like a little while ago, but I've saved to this moment to talk about this. I finally realized what sort of sophistry this guy was trying to weave. He's basically saying, since it says the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the United States, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people, he's trying to assert that the amendment, the 16th Amendment, is adding this power to the Constitution. So now technically, this power has been delegated to the United States by the Constitution. This is the sophistry that he's going with. However, I'm going to prove that this is most definitely not the case. This might have been the intended purpose of the Constitution. As I said just before, these Federalists, specifically James the Conman Madison, the guy who crafted the Bill of Rights in a way that was intentionally deceptive and in a way that could allow the amendments to be manipulated in favor of the federal government. This is why they crafted it this way, so that somebody like this snake in the grass can try to make this assertion or weave this web of sophistry and say, no, this isn't a cap on power. Now the amendment that is giving more power, let's say more power is given to the federal government, they can say, oh, well, that amendment is now technically in the Constitution, and it's now delegating power to the United States Constitution. But of course, this completely ignores reserved to the states respectively or to the people. It's reserved for them. It's held for them, not to be granted to the federal government. And this is probably why he's all wrapped up in this idea that I believe that, like, the original text, and I guess the original text includes the 10th Amendment, is more important than future amendments. Like, he doesn't see a distinction between the two. He thinks that if an amendment is, like, comes out of somewhere else that gives it more power, as long as it's not, like, in direct violation, and this is why he was like, oh yeah, the 18th Amendment is, like, very specific. It very specifically talks about alcohol, and the 21st Amendment that repeals it is very specifically talking about alcohol. And he's like, oh, well, this isn't specific. And this is exactly why James the Conman Madison created this ambiguous Bill of Rights that we have. This is why a lot of the wording of some of our first 10 amendments, it seems like kind of like odd. Like, hey, why would they word it that way? And they word it that way so that it can intentionally be manipulated. However, I'm going to provide context for this. As you're going to see, I'm going to prove that this is completely wrong and that this is most definitely supposed to be a cap on all future power. They're not supposed to get any power from any future amendment. No matter if you have some sophist like this guy or some judge who's like, oh no, well, technically the amendment is now a part of the Constitution, so now that is actually giving this power to the federal government. I'm gonna show this, okay? So just hold on. I'm just clarifying. I just realized, and I guess that makes me slow, kind of makes me a little dumb. I should have caught on to this before, that he was just being a sophist and playing with semantics. Then it goes on to say, this is the 16th Amendment. The Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived without appointment among the several states and without regard to any census or enumeration, clearly giving Congress a power. And he says something, I forgot what he said about the taxation. Oh yeah, it has nothing to do with the amendment process or taxation. That's what he says. Yes, it does. This is a power that they're being granted. It's a new power of taxation that did not exist in the Constitution. This is why this amendment needed to be added. Yes, the federal government had taxing powers in the Constitution before this amendment, but it was not this specific taxing power. Emphasis on the word power, because once again, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. It's very clear. Article 5, of course, is, as we've already mentioned, it's the amending process. Article 5 of the United States Constitution describes the process or the procedure for altering the Constitution. Under Article 5, the process to alter the Constitution consists of proposing an amendment or amendments and subsequent ratification. Okay, so I think we all have already talked about this at length, right? Then he goes on to say, actually, yeah, we're going to be looking at the Federalist Papers in a second, right? So my reply to him, okay, yeah, he's responding to this reply now, right? So let's look at his reply to this reply before we dive in to the other amendments and to the Anti-Federalist and explaining the history of this in great detail. Not like I did in my first video on this topic, which I think I just completely did a disservice. So anyway, let's so I have this. Let's look at his reply. His reply is, that is the crux of the disagreement then. You seem to think that the original text of the Constitution carries more weight than amendments, but that is simply not true. And see, this is, once again, so I was right when I said that his original comment is insinuating that I think that the text carries more weight. But the thing is, like, in this video, in my original video, I never even allude to the original Constitution, the original body, having more authority than the amendments. Okay, I very specifically say that the income tax violates these amendments, not the main body. So anyway, this is another edit, of course. This is just tying back into my previous edit. He, of course, thinks that the original text is the amendments. He includes the 10 amendments in the original text. He's not making this distinction. There is a distinction between the two. He thinks that Article 5, which is the actual original text, it has nothing to do with the 10th Amendment, or the 10th Amendment has nothing to do with that Article 5 process of amending the Constitution. But it does. As we're going to see, I'm going to prove that the 10th Amendment was supposed to directly address this amending process. Because as I'm going to show, those who were against the Constitution were worried that this power that the legislator had, that the Congress had, could actually grant the federal government an unlimited amount of powers. Let's go back. Okay, so that is the crux of the disagreement then. You seem to think that the original text of the Constitution carries more weight than amendments, but that is simply not true. Even if it was true, the 10th Amendment, wait for it, is an amendment. I enjoyed the conversation. I wish you the best of luck. Can anybody make sense of this reply? I cannot make sense of this reply. It's like, what are you talking about, dude? I'm talking about the 10th Amendment with you, and I'm saying that it violates, the 16th Amendment violates the 10th Amendment, and then also in that video, I list off like 3 or 4 other amendments that it also violates. So what is this guy talking about?
What the hell are you talking about? Who are you talking to?
Let's get into now the Anti-Federalist paper and explain exactly why the 10th Amendment is a cap on all powers to the government. So we have this book. I had the privilege, the honor to read this book while I was going for my bachelor's degree because I majored in English literature, and this was in one of my English literature classes. And it's great because it's a historical book. Okay, this is not fiction. This is considered historical papers. So the Essential Federalist and Anti-Federalist Papers by David Mouton, or however you pronounce his name. Yeah, I still can't pronounce his name. Even in my first video when I talk about this guy, I'm like, I don't know how to pronounce his name. I really should know how to say his name because, I mean, I did take a class on it. But to me, this is just like one of those irrelevant things that my brain does not care to file because I got a bunch of other stuff to file and to keep track of. So anyway, in this paper, or in this book, we have one of these Anti-Federalist papers that's titled Address of the Minority of the Pennsylvania Convention. The full title of it is actually really long. It's something like the Address of the Minority of the Pennsylvania Convention to their constituents, or something like that. So anyway, on page 15 of this book, we're going to start off, let's see, which was made in the Confederation of the year 1778 by article of the second viz. Okay, that each state retains, okay, so they're talking about some previous stuff over here. I guess I should have included that, but it's not too important. What's important is what is said here. The legislative power vested in Congress by the foregoing recited sections, and I believe they even talk about Article 5, is so unlimited in its nature, may be so comprehensive and boundless in its exercise, that this alone would be amply sufficient to annihilate the state governments and swallow them up in the grand vortex of general empire. The judicial power vested in Congress are also so various and extensive that by legal ingenuity they may be extended to every case, and thus absorb the state judiciaries. And when we consider the decisive influence that a general judiciary would have over the civil polity of the several states, we do not hesitate to pronounce that this power, unaided by the legislative, would effect a consolidation of the states under one government. And I think that this is important because this Jacko over here, he's like, oh, there's precedent. And this ties perfectly into what they said about the judiciary. That even just through the judges, by laying down a legal precedent, they can swallow up power for themselves. And that's exactly what they've done. But anyway, let's move on to another important quote here. Okay, no, this isn't it. Oh, darn, I forgot a screenshot. Just a second, I gotta stop this video. Alrighty, I had to just go and gather a bunch of information that I realized was missing in my little information lineup over here. And if it was missing this information, this video could have been just as bad or could have suffered the same faults as my first video on this topic, and that is the fault of not having the complete background information. So let me not try to do this quick, because shortcuts are paths to long delays. So we just looked at this, right? We just looked at this statement here: the legislative power vested in Congress by the foregoing recited sections are so unlimited, or is so unlimited in its nature, may be so comprehensive and boundless in its exercise, that this alone would be amply sufficient to annihilate the state governments and swallow them up in the grand vortex of general empire. And it's great that they say general empire, because you're going to see they make comment on the general welfare. So let's take a step back. This is page 15. We got to go back to page 12 when they begin this dissent of theirs. So this is the second dissent that they have. I believe the first dissent that they have here had to do with a lack of Bill of Rights. So we dissent secondly because the powers vested in Congress by this Constitution must necessarily annihilate and absorb the legislative, executive, and judicial powers of the several states, and produce from their ruins one consolidated government, which from the nature of things will be an iron-handed despotism, as nothing short of the supremacy of despotic sway could connect and govern these United States under one government. Nobody talks like this anymore. Nobody talks about the nature of things here. These people, these anti-federalists, were brilliant. They're so freaking smart. Their writing is so comprehensive and covers so much that isn't talked about today. And the best thing is, literally everything that they said came true. So after they say this, they have this beautiful paragraph here, which you should take the time to read, but I'm not going to take the time to read it right now. But by all means, pause the video and read this. It is lovely. It is freaking nobody talks about this now. Nobody talks like this nowadays. And this is exactly why when they cover the anti-federalist papers in the school and the public schools and stuff, they gloss over them. They don't have people actually read the papers. They just try to summarize the points. They're like, oh yeah, the anti-federalists said this, but really this was true. And then they recite propaganda that was pushed by the Federalist. It's disgusting. People have no idea what's really going on. Man plays at tragedy because he does not believe in the reality of the tragedy that's been staged in the civilized world around him, said my favorite philosopher. But anyway, let's go down to this part here. And by the way, what is said here sort of contradicts what I said about the anti-federalist label propaganda. Some of them were against federalization. So if we read this here, that the new government will not be a confederacy of states as it ought, but one consolidated government founded upon the destruction of the several governments of the states, we shall now show. Okay, but this is also can be misconstrued. See, it's saying that this consolidated government, this federalization, will actually end up destroying the several governments of the states. And they actually do show this And literally, I'm telling you, everything that they said has come true in one way or another. So the power of Congress under the new Constitution are complete and unlimited over the purse and the sword, and are perfectly independent of and supreme over the state governments, whose intervention in these great points is entirely destroyed. By virtue of their power of taxation, Congress may command the whole or any part of the property of the people. And this plays directly into this ridiculous person, Stefan's assertion that, oh, the 10th Amendment has nothing to do with power and limiting power and taxes. Oh, man, these people. Just give me supreme power for a little bit, people. Make me the necessary tyrant that Plato says follows a democracy, and I will have this place cleared up in a year. Give me just a year of supreme power. I'm telling you, I know what needs to be done. I know what's being done incorrectly. I have the solutions. All I need is a year of supreme power. Things would get fucking put on track so quick, people's heads would spin off their bodies. They would be like, oh my God, they would literally spin around. They'd be like, what's going on here? Oh. And then after that, it would be a golden age. And I'm not just saying this, oh, he's just talking like all tyrants talk. No. Watch my videos. I know what's going on. I know exactly what's going on. I'm going to prove to you that in this video right now. So they may impose, and this is talking about their power of taxation. They may impose what impost upon commerce. They may impose what land taxes, poll taxes, excises, duties on all written instruments, and duties on every other article that they may judge proper. In short, every species of taxation, whether of an external or internal nature, is comprised in section the 8th of article the 1st. Viz. The Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. As there is no one article of taxation reserved to the state governments, the Congress may monopolize every source of revenue, and thus, indirectly, this is just a copy of that. We got to go up to right here. Indirectly demolish the state governments, for without funds they could not exist. The taxes, duties, and excises imposed by Congress may be so high as to render it impractical to levy further sums on the same articles. But whether this should be the case or not, if the state governments should presume to impose taxes, duties, or excises on the same articles with Congress, the latter may abrogate and repeal the laws whereby they are imposed, upon the allegation that they interfere with the due collection of their taxes, duties, or excises by virtue of the following clause. Part Section 8, Article 1, visa, to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers, and all other powers vested by this Constitution to the governments of the United States, or in any department or offices thereof. The Congress might gloss over this conduct by construing every purpose for which the state legislator now lays taxes to be for the general welfare, and therefore as their jurisdiction. Okay, for those of you who don't understand how profoundly important this is exactly why they're running up the national debt. I've covered this, and I'm pretty confident I covered this in a previous video. The reason why they're running up the national debt is because it will eventually lead to this sort of consolidation. Eventually, the burden on the taxpayer based on the national debt will be so high that they will say, oh, it's for the general welfare that the state stops collecting taxes for like A, B, and C because we need that tax money to pay off the national debt. And of course, other things. This is so important. Okay, now let's go back. I believe I skipped a couple things here. I should have just deleted a couple of these. Some of these are just don't belong here. I thought I just organized this. Okay, established by article. This is So let's also read this, right? So the supremacy of the laws of the United States is established by Article 6, the visa, that this Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made, or which shall be made under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby. Anything in the Constitution or laws or any state to the contrary notwithstanding. Okay, so this right here is saying that the federal Constitution and the laws that the federal government makes has supremacy over the states. And this is why, I mean, people, when they talk about the Constitution, this is what pisses me off about Brian over at High Impact Flicks, because he constantly talks, oh, the Constitution, and anybody talking about the Constitution like it's a good thing just simply do not know what they're talking about. Their chatter, their low IQ, uninformed chatter is just making the water more muddy and convincing people that the Constitution is this thing that it's not. But anyway, let's now go over more taxation. They talk more about taxation on page 21 of this book that I mentioned, the Federalist Anti-Federalist paper, but you can also find it directly in this Anti-Federalist paper, the address of the minority of the Pennsylvania Convention to their constituents. Let's check out this paragraph here. The power of direct taxation applies to every individual, as Congress under this government is expressly vested with the authority of laying a capitation or poll tax upon every person to any amount. This is a tax that, however oppressive in its nature and unequal in its operation, is certain as to its produce and simple in its collection. It cannot be evaded like the objects of impost or excises, and will be paid, because all that a man hath will he give for his head. This tax is so congenial to the nature of despotism that it has ever been a favorite under such governments. Some of those who were in the late General Convention from this state have long labored to introduce a poll tax among us. The power of direct taxation will further apply to every individual, as Congress may tax land, cattle, trades, occupations, etc., to any amount, and every object of internal taxation is of that nature that, however oppressive, the people will have but this alternative, either to pay the tax or let their property be taken, for all resistance will be vain. The standing army and select militia would enforce the collection. Okay, so even here, they're talking about direct taxation and how it's a favorite tool of despotic governments. And they talk about right here, this is exactly what's happening today, how this taxation, you can't avoid it. Okay, any resistance of it towards it would be futile. If you resist, they'll just take your property, which is exactly what they want. They use this so that they can then take up more private property for themselves. It's a consolidation of government. So everything this guy Stefan talked about, oh, taxes and all this stuff, he doesn't know what he's talking about. This power granted to Congress in the 16th Amendment of direct taxation was a very clear complaint of the anti-federalist who said, hey, if you guys don't address this, we're not ratifying the Constitution. And James the Conman Madison and these other Federalist shills managed to convince them that, oh, don't worry, the 10th Amendment covers all of this. Because they also had a complaint that, hey, you guys are not giving the state governments power. The state government has no power in this Constitution. And of course, that was supposed to be covered in the 10th Amendment. Now, let's see, where are we? Okay, now we're going back to page 9 here. And now I have page 9 in my previous video for two reasons. One, these are amendments. These were proposed amendments by these address of the minority, of this minority of the Pennsylvania Convention. They said, hey, look, we don't have a Bill of Rights here. We got to have like at least these amendments. And they gave a list of amendments. And these amendments, this list here shows that the Bill of Rights was in fact supposed to address these complaints. And we know that because many of the amendments here, or many of the proposed amendments here, are covered in the Bill of Rights. Like right here, that excessive bail ought not to be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel nor unusual punishment inflicted. That warrants unsupported by evidence whereby any officer or messenger may be commanded or required to search suspected places or to seize any person or persons, his or their property not particularly described, are grievous and oppressive, and shall not be granted either by the magistrate of the federal governments or others. Clearly, these were supposed to be addressed. They refused to ratify unless they were addressed. And once again, James the Conman Madison, he created this absurd Bill of Rights And actually, this is my favorite here. I'm going to include it in this video because I've talked about this in my original Second Amendment. Check out what the Second Amendment was supposed to be here. There's a little digression. That the people have a right to bear arms for the defense of themselves and their own state, or the United States, or for the purpose of killing game, and no law shall be passed for disarming the people or any of them unless for crimes committed or real danger of public injury from individuals. Those individuals would have their right pulled from them. Not everybody. And as standing armies in the time of peace are dangerous to liberty, they ought not to be kept up, and that the military shall be kept under strict subordination to and be governed by the civil powers. This one is sort of covered in the Constitution, that the Congress is the one who has to basically approve of a declaration of war. Okay, James the Con Man Madison, instead he created that bullshit Second Amendment that we have nowadays that can be very easily construed and very easily interpreted in a way that can actually take everybody's guns away. People don't even realize. I know it's coming down the pipe eventually. Maybe not now, maybe not 10 years from now, maybe not 20 years from now, but probably 100 years from now. They can very easily construe the Second Amendment as saying, hey, look at this. As long as we have militias, then you guys have the right to bear arms. If you're in a militia, hey, you have the right to bear arms. We're technically not disarming the people because the people can have arms in their militia. And also, this covers the defense of themselves. This very clearly says you have the right to bear arms to defend yourselves and their states. Okay, so it's bogus what we got, people, and people have no idea, man. We're so ignorant because we're fed so many lies, so much propaganda, and so much of this vital information is withheld from us and glossed over. But anyway, let's go down now to and by the way, they also thought we should have a right to basically hunt because that's a source of food. And they're like, hey, look, if the government can stop you from hunting, then they can control your food supply. Really important stuff. Whatever, I'm not going to get into that right now. That's a whole other argument. Let's look at number 9 here, though. That no law shall be passed to restrain the legislators of the several states from enacting laws for imposing taxes except imposts and duties on goods imported or exported, and that no taxes except imposts and duties upon goods imported and exported and postage on letters shall be levied by the authority of Congress. They strictly wanted to forbid Congress from direct taxation. And of course, they expanded upon that. This was page 9, but we covered their expansion upon that with this direct taxation discussion over here. Okay, let's go over here. I know this video is long, but it's super freaking important. So then I replied to this guy because he talked about the original comment, right? So I'm like, what? When did I say the original text carries more weight than the amendments? The crux of the problem is that you don't know anything about the historical context. You're ignorant about the background that provides context for the whole thing, the original text and the amendments. Yeah, you're just ignorant, Stefan. If you're watching this, you don't know anything. To me, you are a paramecium brain. Trust me, I know more about the Constitution than our Supreme Judges do. I think I know more about the Constitution than probably anybody alive today. And now I am blessing everybody else with that information for free on my YouTube channel. Because knowledge should be available to all. At no expense. And by the way, I just want to comment, when I complain about doing stuff for free and not receiving any help, I really don't mean it entirely. I don't pray for an easy life. I pray for the strength to endure a hard one. And if you all paid me for this, then I wouldn't be doing this as a sort of sacrifice. I like that I'm doing this, sacrificing my own time. Some part of me really does like that. But another part of me knows that if I did have support, I would be able to do so much more. I would not be wasting my support on frivolities like all of these other YouTubers do that produce junk, that produce homogenous garbage. They produce the same homogenous garbage video after video after video. If you've seen 1 or 2 of their videos, you basically have seen all of their videos. But yet, I know that they get support not from real people. They get support from the club, disguised as people. I know what's really going on. It's all a club, and I ain't in it. And that's why you give me supreme power for 1 year, that club, they're not going to be a problem anymore. Trust me on that. It's going to be scorched earth policy. You know how they have in a couple parts of in history where there are some people who take power and just completely erase those who were corrupt? That's what would happen. I would be that individual. Scorched earth policy, my friends.
For crimes against this country, you are hereby sentenced to be shot into the center of the sun.
Anyway, let's look at the other amendments that are violated by the 16th Amendment now. We're moving on to, I believe there's 3 other amendments that are violated by the 16th Amendment. Let's look at the first, what amendment? This is the 14th Amendment here. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the states wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of the citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. So this applies to the 16th Amendment because the 16th Amendment is depriving people of property without due process of law. Now, due process of law is actually going through the courts. It's not, the Congress passed an amendment and there we go. That's the due process. No. And of course, here, property, money is property. Okay, property law, personal property, also referred to as movable property, is anything other than land that can be the subject of ownership, including stocks, money, notes, patents, and copyrights, as well as intangible property. Okay, so clearly the 16th Amendment is depriving us of property without due process. It's depriving us of the money, our money, without due process of law. Boom. That's violate the 16th Amendment violates that. So 16th Amendment, if they're going to pass a law, they got to address this too. Then we got the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting any establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peacefully to assemble and to petition the government for redress. So the 16th Amendment violates the free exercise of religion, because the 16th Amendment is indirectly taking their money and putting it to causes, supporting causes that are actually against their religion. You're indirectly making them violate their religious oaths. I know, it's a real stretch. It's not a stretch. You're just too stupid to see it if you disagree with me on this. Empirical reality. That's what's happening. You're making them put money towards things that they would not otherwise support. And this is a huge problem with these sort of direct taxes. So neither slavery, and now this is one of my favorite, this is the 13th Amendment, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, this would be without due process, shall exist within the United States, or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Well, guess what? Involuntary servitude, you have these involuntary taxes. Let's look at involuntary servitude. Let's look at servitude. Definition 1, a condition which one lacks liberty, especially to determine one's course of action or way of life. A right by which something, money, such as a piece of land or property owned by one person, is subject to a specified use or enjoyment by another. These are involuntary taxes. By being involuntary, by being direct taxes in this manner, you're violating this. And this is, some people have said that when they sign off on income taxes or when they sign off on their taxes, when they file a tax return, that's them giving their voluntary consent. So I could sort of see how that plays out. And I was sort of reading the 16th Amendment tax laws and stuff. And there are, if you look at the language, it does say that it is applying to people who are filing taxes. So I believe, actually, if you even look at the lingo of the United States Code that has to do with income tax, it seems like it actually only applies to people who are filing their taxes. Because when they go to file their taxes, they're now consenting to this sort of taxation. But regardless, it shouldn't be like that. We shouldn't have to worry about such deceptive trickery. We shouldn't have to worry about being lied to and told, oh no, you gotta pay these income taxes. It should be very clearly stated. Hey everyone, just so you know, you only gotta pay this income tax if you're filing a tax return, if you're expecting a return on taxes from your government. And even that is actually unjust. Because it's like, hey, you know what? I should be able to file a tax return, meaning I get some of my taxes returned to me without having to pay this clearly unconstitutional tax. If I was taxed in all these other brackets, if I had all of these voluntary taxes, I should be able to get some of that tax back without having to submit to such an unjust taxation like income tax. So once again, it's all unjust. It's not just whatsoever. It's a product of despotism. It's a product of tyranny. It goes to supporting tyranny and imperialism. And it's wrong. And this is why we really need, and I have to say this, we need the necessary tyrant to come into play because the whole system is corrupt. All Congress, all Senate, every branch of government, the states, they're all in on it. It would be almost impossible, I don't want to say impossible, but almost impossible to break away from what's going on using their system, because you would literally have to address every branch, thousands, tens of thousands of employed corrupt people, the judges, all of these people. This system, yeah, as people say, oh yeah, it makes it hard for people to really get away with like altering it in a bad way. No, it makes it hard for people to actually alter it in a good way. Okay, yeah, they do have a perfect system laid down to make it so that people cannot break away from the tyranny that they signed off on way back in 1787 and 1788 when the Constitution was being ratified. And that's why a necessary tyrant has to come in. But they have laws where basically makes this necessary tyrant a violation of the Constitution. You'd be basically considered like a treasonous person who's like against the Constitution. Like you'd be an insurrectionist. Okay, I'm not asking for insurrection. I'm asking to go back to what the country was supposed to be. Go back to the Declaration of Independence. And that's actually how it would be done. This person, or these people, this party, maybe we can do it within the system. It's possible. I'm not totally advocating for this necessary tyrant. It is possible if a party is an advocate of what's in the Declaration of Independence, and if this party can show that the current Constitution is in violation of the Declaration of Independence and in violation of these agreements that were supposed to be had between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists with these amendments. So maybe it's possible to not need a necessary time. Maybe it's totally possible to do it within the system to show, hey, look, this you guys are all in violation of the actual the spirit of the Constitution. So maybe that's possible. So I retract what I said about we needing a necessary tyrant. We just need a political party that really knows what's going on. We need a political party that can actually vocalize and articulate what's really happening. And the people, of course, I'm pretty confident they will listen. And that's what I want to do. In like 5 years or so, or when I have actual support. Right now I'm trying to do this independently. That's why I say 5 years, because in 5 years I'll have myself established in such a way where I will be able to independently support myself. But if I had the support, I'd be on the street every day sharing this message with people, showing people how our government is violating their own oaths, at least the spirit of it. And I would be actually educating people, bypassing this algorithm that has my channel highly suppressed. I'd be on the street where there is no algorithm. I'd be making sure to be consistent with it so that the news would eventually have to report on me. That's what I would do if I actually had support. But I got no support right now. So this will have to be put off 5 years. Hopefully I'm alive in 5 years. If I'm not, it's a major loss for humanity. You guys realize that, all right? Keep that in mind. I'm the real McCoy. I'm the real deal. I'm not here to shill out. I'm not here controlled by some other puppet strings. I'm the real deal. Anyway, Let me stop with this. People are going to be like, you're just on a high horse. You're just arrogant. You got like a Jesus complex. No, man, I've just seen enough. I've been around the block a few times. I've seen who's out there. I've spotted all these shills on all of these different platforms. I see how all these supposedly alternative platforms push other shills. It's a big club, people. It's a very big club. It has its tentacles everywhere and everything, except for this guy right here. I can't stress this enough. Anyway, if I do perish, at least I have my channel here, which hopefully somebody else can pick up on and carry that torch. I'm going to end the video here. Stay happy, stay healthy, and stay sharp.
You failed. You failed. You fuck.
You got kind of a dark side, don't you?